Or you will do this, where you do that thing where they pass notes, right? And so, like, I was over here and my girlfriend was, like, over there. And so I write her a little note telling her how much I adore and how much I love her and how she means so much to me. Figuring I could trust the kids in my class, right? So I take it, I fold it up tight, keep it, nice and tight, and just pass it along. And you hope the teacher doesn't see it, because you know what happens if the teacher sees it, right? They read it in front of everyone. Well, too bad the teacher saw it. The teacher saw it getting passed around and said, "Someone passing a note?" And they're like, "Oh no." And so my face gets red, and I'm sitting there and I'm embarrassed. And he gets it, and he opens it up, and everybody's like, "Ooh," they're waiting for this. What's it say? What's it say? And he began to read it. And I was like, oh, and I just sunk into my seat. It was like the worst thing ever. Now, I don't know if you've ever done that or had someone read a note of yours or someone read an email of yours. You sent out some snooping around, or someone dig into your diary, maybe. If anyone's ever done anything like that, or, it could be anything silly like that. But this morning's, I'll just say this morning we're going to look into a letter. Okay? Because that's what this is. It's a letter from God to His church. All right? And He's writing to the church of Smyrna. All right? So the church of Smyrna means to be crushed and fragrant. Okay? It means to be crushed and fragrant. That's what it means. And he writes this letter to the people in Smyrna. Now, the people in Smyrna, at least at that time, everything would have been going well for them, but things were going to change for them drastically. And what people would do to them, what people would say to them, and how they were going to really suffer for their belief. And so we're going to go there right now. We're looking in the book of Revelation. Last week we talked a little bit, we're talking a little bit about hearing what the Spirit has to say. And last week was return to your first love, in case you missed it. Return to your first love. If you need to do that, go ahead and do that right now. And go from your first love. And then he has something different to say to a different church. Okay, so we're looking at what he says to the 7 different churches. All right, so we're looking at one verse at a time. And we're going to start there. He says, "And to the angel of the church in Smyrna write, the first and the last who is dead and has come to life says this." So who's he talking about? Who? He's talking about Christ, right? The first, the last who is dead and has come to life says this. All right? So he's trying to identify himself with his church, saying, "Hey, it's me. I've got a personal message for you." And so they would have been pretty excited, right? If someone writes you a letter or you get an email, you're expecting and waiting for it, and you're excited to hear this. If God were to write you a letter, if in the mailbox or your email box it popped up as like from God, you'd be like, "What? I gotta at least check it out." And so you'd want to check it out. So they were pretty excited about this letter that was coming to them. All right, so here's what he says. And that's important, and we'll get back to that. "I know your tribulation and your poverty." All right. Now, at this point, they may have had tribulation and poverty, but this was probably written a couple hundred years before they would have ever received it. All right? This was written a couple hundred years before they would have ever received this letter. "So I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich. And the blasphemy by those who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan." And I'm going to go ahead and I'll come back to it. There's only 4 verses this morning, so hopefully you can handle that one, right? "Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life." Verse 11 says, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death." All right, so let's go back to verse 9. Okay, let's go back to verse 9. "I know your tribulation and your poverty." And I think that the real important thing about this is like, I know what you're going through. I know your tribulation and your poverty. If anybody knows tribulation and poverty, it was Christ himself. It wasn't like, I just know what's going on with you, but I know because I've gone through it myself. And so here's a Savior who's overcome everything. He's raised from the dead. He's sitting in heaven. And he feels what's going on for his people. He's like, I know your tribulation and your poverty. Here's a church that was going about doing great things. There's no rebuke here in this message to them. But he's like, I know what you're going through. And really what they were about to go through. But you are rich. Now, I don't know what kind of tribulation or poverty you might be in right now, but I'll tell you this, he knows. He knows exactly what's going on. And says, this and all of it, you're rich. When I used to be in a situation where I used to think having money would make me kind of climb up the ladder in society. That I would be just a little bit better than other people. Or I'd finally get up to this idea of what life was supposed to be like, and I'd finally made it. If I could just make, I was like, man, I just want to make $25,000 a year. If I could just make $25,000 a year, that would be great. And I knew I didn't make it if I could make $25,000 a year. And then I realized $25,000 a year wasn't enough. Because I didn't know how to spend, didn't know how to do stuff, and it didn't matter how much money I'd ever make. I just spent it away and didn't know some things. But I don't think he's talking about the whole rich thing here as far as money. He's like, I know your poverty. They didn't have a lot, but they were rich in God's things. They were really rich in God's things. Now, if you look at your bank account right now with God, okay, your blessings and your not so blessings, okay, look at those things right now. Are you rich? I mean, stop and think about it. Are you really rich? Then live like a rich person. Okay? If you're really rich in God's things, live like a rich person. And I say spiritually rich. And there's complete different than walking around destitute and poverty and, oh man, it's all bad and everything's bad and I don't have a relationship with God and things are horrible. And the Bible says, at least in Ephesians, that we've been given every spiritual blessing that we could be given already. You haven't. You just probably haven't, written a check for it, tried to use it, get the cash out, try to do something with what you have. But He's given that to you already. Extremely rich in what God has for you in your life. Remember, Jesus was not a rich guy. He says, I don't even have a house. I don't have, he just had his clothes and he walked around and he relied on other people. I don't think any of us are that far down at this point. Although it is. And maybe you are. But know this, you're still rich. You are rich. Okay? And the blasphemy by those who say they are Jews and not, but are a synagogue of Satan. And really, these are, at the time, the Jews were giving the people of Smyrna, the Christians of Smyrna at that time, just a real hard time. Okay? They would try to persecute them and do wrong to them and that kind of stuff. And so they think they're doing the right things. And God said this is going to happen. And this is what's going to happen really to you in your life also. Persecutions come from many different ways. One is from people that say they believe in God. All right? Look at all the wars. Look at the Crusades. Look at everything that's happened and gone on. A lot of it's religious. All right? Believe it or not, it's religious based. You can go into our politics. You can do all kinds of things and realize that religion determines why even this country does a lot of different things. Truthfully. So he says, I know what's going on. And the letter goes on. He's like, I know what's happening. I'm feeling you. And go on to the next verse. Verse 10. Do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison. So really, it's like, you know what? I know you're going through a hard time. Guess what? It's only going to get worse. What an encouraging letter. Right? What an encouraging faith. Guess what? Life is only going to get worse for you. You'd think they were like, oh my goodness. This is what? You're going to be thrown into prison. It's not just going to be harassment. But Satan works to try to do all he can to hinder the gospel. All right? Try to hinder the good news, to get us to spread it. Does whatever he can to hinder us in our lives. And I don't think he has to throw us in prison, actually. I don't think he has to throw any of us in prison. Only because I know, at least statistically, that the church in North America is dying away and losing members. And he hasn't had to throw anyone in prison in America. All right, you think about persecution. I have some statistics here. It's kind of, I won't say it's cool, but I like statistics. 105,000 martyrs. Okay, this last year. Low estimates, 105,000 martyrs. Anyone here ever been a martyr? Good, you didn't raise your hand. That's right. Because a martyr is someone who gave his life. He's no longer here, right? And so 105,000 martyrs. That means that's about 287 martyrs every day.
Wow.
That turns out to be 12 every hour, or about 1 every 5 seconds. Okay? So every 5 minutes, I think. Yeah, every 5 minutes. So 1 every 5 minutes. So we've been here for, at least an hour, most of you. 12. And it just goes on day and night, constantly. God, where the gospel's trying to move and spread out and get all these places, that's where real persecution happens often. What do you think? I'm just curious. I'm going to do a little table time here. Why were they really being persecuted? Okay? And this might not take long, but just discuss it at your table. Why were they being persecuted? Ready, break.
Who, them guys?
Why were they being persecuted?